March 3, 1943. The sky above the Bismarck Sea was bruised with storm clouds and smoke. Beneath them, a Japanese convoy, 8 transports and 8 destroyers, steamed westward from Rabaul, cutting through the rolling blue-gray water toward New Guinea. On board were more than 6,900 soldiers of the Imperial Japanese 51st Division, along with tanks, artillery, and food supplies for the battered garrisons along the northern coast. For them, this was a voyage of necessity. For the Allies, it would become a moment of revelation, an airborne massacre that would change the very nature of naval warfare. U.S. Army Air Force's Pacific Report, March 1943. The first sighting came from the east. A lone B-24 Liberator, its engines droning low, broke through the cloud deck at 10:15 a.m. The crew could hardly believe what they saw. Ships stretching for miles, gray hulls slicing through the sea, white wakes cutting sharp angles. The message went out immediately in Morse code. Large convoy, sighted heading toward Allied reconnaissance log, March 3, 1943. Within hours, every Allied airfield across New Guinea was alive. Mechanics fueled planes until the smell of aviation gas filled the humid air. Gunners checked belts of .50 caliber ammunition. Pilots, most barely out of their 20s, gathered around briefing maps. They were told this: the Japanese convoy must not reach By mid-morning on March 3rd, the Allied strike force began to take shape. American B-25 Mitchells, Australian Beaufighters, and a squadron of 20 Havocs lined up on coral runways. Over 90 aircraft in total. Medium bombers, low-level attackers, and long-range fighters, prepared to descend upon a moving fleet in open ocean. It was a tactic few believed could even work. RAF Operations Brief, March 1943. The first wave struck just before noon. The Japanese crews saw them too late. Beaufighters came in low, barely above the wave tops, firing 20mm cannons into the decks of destroyers. Tracers raked across steel and flesh alike. Gunners on the Japanese ships returned fire, but the sky was already filled with the deep, throaty roar of B-25 engines. Then came something new. The bombers didn't dive from above. They came in low, impossibly low, barely 50 feet above the sea. Each Mitchell streaked toward the convoy, their noses bristling with 8.50 caliber machine guns. The lead aircraft of Major John "Jock" Hennebrie's squadron opened up first. Streams of bullets ripped into a transport's bridge, cutting down its officers. The next instant, a 500-pound bomb skipped across the waves like a stone and slammed into the ship's hull just above the waterline. A second later, impact. The explosion blew a tower of fire into the sky. Combat Film Analysis, Southwest Pacific Theater, 1943. Japanese lookouts screamed as more bombers came in at near surface level, their shadows dancing across the waves. The sea erupted with water columns, oil slicks, and floating debris. Allied pilots called it skip bombing, but to the men below, it was something far worse. An unstoppable storm of steel that came from nowhere and left nothing standing. By 12:20 p.m., 2 transports were burning fiercely. One destroyer lay dead in the water, its stern sheared off. Another listing to port as fires spread toward its magazines. On board, Japanese soldiers tried to man deck guns, but their rounds flew harmlessly into the sky. Smoke blanketed the fleet. Visibility dropped to near zero. The smell of burning oil and cordite hung thick over the sea. Imperial Japanese Navy log, March 1943. Allied aircrews circled back, strafing lifeboats and supply barges. They were relentless, methodical. The sea boiled beneath them. Pilots reported seeing hundreds of men in the water, soldiers, sailors, even officers, clinging to wreckage. Some raised their hands in surrender. Others fired pistols into the air. Few survived for long. The ocean itself seemed to burn. By 1 p.m., the battle had lasted less than 15 minutes. And yet, in that short span, 6 Japanese transports and 4 destroyers were destroyed. Thousands of soldiers who had been destined to reinforce La were now scattered across the sea. The Allied losses? 0 aircraft shot down in the first attack. It was a slaughter so complete that even veteran pilots returned to base in stunned silence. U.S. 5th Air Force After-Action Report, March 1943. But as the wreckage drifted and the smoke thinned, the Japanese high command demanded answers. How had the Americans suddenly become so accurate, so deadly? At sea, this was not the high-altitude bombing they had grown accustomed to. It wasn't naval artillery or torpedoes. It was something else, something that turned aircraft into precision ship killers. In Tokyo, military analysts dismissed early reports as exaggeration. How could medium bombers, armed with conventional bombs, annihilate an entire convoy in minutes? But in Rabaul, officers who had witnessed the attack firsthand described something more terrifying. The B-25s had flown as if they knew exactly where every gun and ship would be. Their bombs seemed guided, their approach coordinated, their fire devastating. Intercepted Japanese naval message, March 4th, 1943. Allied commanders, meanwhile, knew exactly what had happened. Behind the chaos of the attack lay months of innovation. Mechanics and engineers at Port Moresby, Brisbane, and Townsville experimenting with new tactics and new hardware. Pilots had learned how to fly lower, faster, deadlier. Bombs had been modified. Gun mounts had been reinforced. Radios had been fine-tuned to coordinate complex multi-plane attacks. The key, however, wasn't just in the pilots. It was in the ground crews who had spent countless nights in dimly lit hangars, adjusting fuel mixtures, replacing propellers, and drilling extra gun ports into the noses of the B-25s, turning them into airborne gunships. Maintenance log, 90th Air Base Squadron, February 1943. Those same gunships now hovered over the drifting remains of Japan's last major convoy to New Guinea. Allied reconnaissance photographed the burning sea, the twisted metal, the oil-slicked waves. Analysts estimated over 3,000 Japanese dead, with survivors being hunted by sharks and strafed by follow-up patrols. Allied Intelligence Bulletin, March 1943. The Japanese Navy supply line to La was severed. Their troops, isolated and starving, would be hunted down in the jungles of New Guinea in the months to come. Yet for the Allied pilots, one question loomed over the smoking water. What had made this strike so utterly, devastatingly effective? The answer lay not just in bravery, or luck, or timing. It was in the machinery, the modifications, the weapons, the innovation that had transformed the humble B-25 into something the Japanese had never faced before. The next chapter of this battle wouldn't be fought in the skies or seas, but in the machine shops and drafting rooms that made this kind of precision possible. Because what happened over the Bismarck Sea wasn't just an air raid. It was the birth of a new kind of warfare. And the secret behind it had been hiding inside the B-25's nose all along. The secret began months before the attack. In late 1942, deep inside dusty hangars at Townsville Air Depot, engineers from North American Aviation and mechanics from the U.S. 5th Air Force gathered around a battered B-25C Mitchell. Its nose, once clear glass designed for a bombardier, had been stripped away. In its place, they mounted solid aluminum plating and 8.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns for on each side of the nose. The concept came from Colonel Paul "Pappy" Gunn, a former civilian pilot turned inventive engineer, whose unorthodox ideas often blurred the line between genius and madness. Engineering modification log, Townsville Depot, December 1942. Gunn believed that the key to stopping Japan's convoys wasn't altitude bombing. It was speed, precision, and overwhelming firepower. High-altitude bombs missed too often in tropical weather, where clouds and wind made targeting nearly impossible. But a bomber that could swoop down, strafe, and deliver its bombs at mast height, literally skipping them like stones into ship hulls, could destroy entire fleets. The challenge lay in re-engineering the aircraft to survive such punishing maneuvers. To achieve this, engineers recalibrated the propellers, reinforced the wings, and rebalanced the Mitchell center of gravity. They installed side-mounted gun packs, allowing pilots to unleash up to 4,800 rounds per minute in a single head-on pass. The B-25's Pratt & Whitney R-2600 twin Cyclone engines were modified to output 1,700 horsepower each, enabling the plane to accelerate to nearly 280 miles per hour, even at low altitude. Technical Manual TM9 to 294, 1943. These were no longer bombers in the traditional sense. They were flying gunships capable of strafing and bombing simultaneously. And gun skip bombing technique was the final piece. Allied pilots practiced endlessly in the northern Australian outback, dropping dummy bombs over rivers and harbors until they could make them skip 3, 4, even 5 times before striking a target at the waterline. The bomb fuses were modified with delayed detonators, allowing the ordnance to explode inside enemy hulls rather than on impact. U.S. Air Force Gunnery Training Film, 1943. In early 1943, intelligence intercepts revealed that Japan was preparing to send a major reinforcement convoy from Rabaul to Lae. The operation, codenamed 81 by the Japanese, was meant to secure their grip on New Guinea. But for the Allies, it was a perfect chance to test this new doctrine in real combat. At dawn on March 3rd, waves of modified B-25s, each bristling with machine guns and armed with 4 500-pound bombs, roared off from Port Moresby and Dobadura. Their formation, guided by precise radio coordination, crossed the Owen-Stanley Range and descended toward the Bismarck Sea. 5th Air Force Operations Report, March 1943. The first phase of the attack involved Australian Beaufighters flying in at mast height to suppress Japanese anti-aircraft gunners. Their job was to distract, not destroy, to keep the enemy's heads down. As they strafed the decks, the B-25 swept in just seconds behind. The timing was perfect. One formation came in from the east, the other from the northwest, each pilot timing his release to the second. At 250 miles per hour, Captain Ed Larner's Mitchell skimmed barely 50 feet above the waves. He opened fire 800 yards out, his 8 forward guns blazing. The rounds shredded the bridge of the destroyer Horatio. Flames erupted across its deck. Seconds later, Larner released 2 500-pound bombs. They skipped once, twice, then slammed into the hull just below the deck line. The explosion tore the ship in half. Combat Film Number 132, Bismarck Sea. On the transport Kaikasamaru, chaos reigned. Japanese troops, many below deck, felt the concussion before they saw the flames. Within moments, ammunition stores detonated. Survivors leapt into burning oil slicks. One officer reportedly screamed, "They attack like demons from a sea." Dramatized composite. Captured Japanese survivor report, March 1943. Each Allied wave followed the same lethal choreography. Beaufighters strafed, Mitchell struck low, and 20 Havocs dropped fragmentation bombs from above to catch survivors on deck. The precision was shocking, far beyond what the Japanese anticipated from clumsy American bombers. Imperial Japanese Navy Action Report, March 1943, but the true secret wasn't just in the planes or bombs. It was in the coordination. Engineers at Motorola and RCA had developed compact FM radios capable of clearer communication even in tropical storms. Pilots could now synchronize attacks down to the second, adjusting approach vectors in real time. What looked like chaos from the sea was, in truth, a perfectly orchestrated ballet of destruction. Bureau of Aeronautics Communication Report, 1943, by 12:10 p.m., the sea was engulfed in fire. The transport Maru took a direct hit and began listing. The destroyer Tokitsuke's attempted to rescue survivors, but was crippled by a second wave. Flames stretched across the surface of the ocean, fed by leaking oil and ammunition. Allied pilots reported seeing men burning alive in the water, an image that would haunt them for years. Pilot debrief, 345th Bombardment Group, March 1943. The Japanese convoy commander, Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura, watched helplessly from the bridge of his flagship, the Shirayuki. When the next attack wave arrived, a direct bomb hit